this segment, I would say, is really something that's very near and dear to my heart, right? Because I actually I had to stop for a minute and have a moment with myself because I had really a moment to where I was digging for information, but I couldn't find enough to satisfy me here, right? And this particular subject is regarding how Rio de Janeiro, they have been given wo- the title of World Book Capital of 2025, right? And they were given this by the United Nations for Education, Sciences, and Culture. And I don't know if you can tell yet, but the idea here is I'm very much interested and invested in transforming a city's culture by various means. With the construction of this project that I won't shut up about, right? The Foundry. And the good Foundry, not the Peter Thiel Palantir Foundry. Jeez, please don't think about that. Um, I would say, or I'm definitely a construction specialist on resume, but in terms of a more accurate title for myself, I would say is more so, I would guess, a engineer of energetic environments, right? That's what I truly think about when I build. That's a more accurate description of my mindset in building and approaching building. Uh, Now, this idea of really changing a city, and in the last segment I talked a little bit about like mesh networks or local internet. I've developed the concept a bit, but I'm waiting to talk to really some more people before actually releasing something formally. I might just release it and just update it as it comes in and see what we can do with that. But I am very much interested in, like I said, investing and transforming, uh, particularly, I would say, the culture around like spirituality, nature, indie investigations, nightlife, local content creators, local art, and of course, books. So I don't think these things are mutually exclusive by any means. And I think this particular story told me just how hungry I was about just the idea of how they use, just how cities are transformed by books in general, right? Or the usage of libraries and books in that nature, right? Because for those who don't know, Washington, D.C. was not always Washington, D.C. Uh, it was transformed into the capital that it is. In Washington, D.C.'s case, the the actual city, it was repurposed to become this paradise for the upper echelon of society. And unfortunately, that really just led to just a more racist city in general. It was actually pretty multi-ethnic, right, before what took place. Um, and that's one of the main things, or one of a tremendous inspiration in terms of how the city transformed, regardless of how it transformed, but the idea of transforming that city. Uh, there are also some really just great Islamic cities that were transformed, and they're transformed in various ways, but they added libraries and just various forms of art in general, in terms of that being kind of a real, leading to a real change in the culture of those particular places. And one city in particular, Baghdad, in the height of its civilization, it was a great city or a great center for just Islamic culture, right? And they prioritized translating like various books, and they were known for being really a powerhouse when it came down to like just pioneering a lot of like science and what took place there. And with with this particular case, right, with Rio de Janeiro, it I think a lot of things took place in terms of the transformation. And I'm going to link this short article in my opinion. But don't think I don't think it really describes, or I couldn't find information to describe the transformation in terms of what it was before and explaining how it got to the point of being recognized by UNESCO. Now, I'm going to really elaborate on the concept of how books transform cities. And this is going to be paywalled, so you guys can look for that in the Foundry Research and Development Substack if you're interested. But I'll be sure to tease everyone in the future about that. But the idea here is what's really missing, right? That transformation, despite the actual information not being readily, like, just something that I could readily find. What I clearly see is Rio de Janeiro responding to this recognition by UNESCO. And they want to really use use a particular festival, or they use a particular festival. This is something that happened last month, apparently, to promote more reading. And the dates were June 13th through June 22nd. And I haven't seen articles about how the particular event went, but one of the ideas was to use a book park concept to broaden the reach. So that's just one of the ideas here, right? Because they were essentially designing the various parts of the city and the festival just around the concept of shedding more light on the books available. And this idea of placing summaries, they particularly placed summaries in cars in the Ferris wheel, right? So you get in and you have like you're having like some kind of book narrated to you while you're riding the Ferris wheel. They also had themes around escape rooms that were really just made to replicate literary settings. And they'd also like put things like knowledge test in the actual escape room for like certain challenges. They were also placing books around like different play areas. This idea of the actual event itself, I couldn't find a tremendous amount of information on it, but I do think that just the ideas themselves, in terms of just the title of the ideas, it really does lighten up the imagination in terms of what could have taken place there. And one was called the Night of the Books, right? And this was a 24-hour marathon of activities. And another thing was called the Book Parade. The city right now, in terms of responding to UNESCO, it has plans to modernize its library system, and also it has something very interesting called the Royal Portuguese Reading Room, and that's in the capital. I have to really shut myself up because my brain just explodes with like a lot of different ideas in terms of how to put and place and integrate books in a city and things of that nature, right? But this idea of literature, and in the case of the Foundry, there's a lot more that's tied into that particular concept more than just the literature. But the idea here is that these are tools and pieces that can transform a city when done in a certain way, right? And I say that either I have to be either proven wrong to be severely disillusioned, or the idea is that this is really something that could take place. And I really do honestly believe that. There's also this concept around a book themed neighborhood. And that is another tremendous source of tremendous source of I suppose it is a tremendous source of confirmation, but it's a tremendous source of inspiration, is what I really meant to say. And the idea here is that, you know, you guys have maybe come into contact with like neighborhood little libraries or little free libraries where everybody kind of stores their books. And this is kind of the concept of a neighborhood little library evolved. And I think we can do that and take that even a step further than that, but also using that concept, I would say, in itself, right? And this concept, this idea of the World Book Capital, and my just tapping into this hunger to know more about what happened here. There is so much tied to this concept in terms of how it relates to the Foundry. But like I said, I'm going to cut it short here, but I want you guys to understand, in any case, this very much, I would say, is my quote-unquote soul's purpose, to engineer an energetic environment that produces and refines Renaissance people. And that brings us to the end of this sermon. I mentioned how Baghdad and Washington were transformed by the culture around books and intellectualism. But in terms of the Renaissance ponderings, I really want you guys to think about what makes a city transform, and what changes have you seen or heard about in terms of transforming the culture around a city. What changes would you like to see, or better yet, just flat out, what would you say makes a Renaissance city?